Hello, Waffle lovers, and welcome to another episode of Whatever Flips Your Waffle here on 365sportscast.com. I'm your host, Mark Domeyer, coming to you from the bunker deep in the heart of southern Minnesota. Guess what? Things are heating up. We're not frozen anymore. The hot stove league is in full effect as spring training is getting started. Major League Baseball is back, and we've got a lot to talk about this week. I'm glad you've decided to tune in and listen to my ramblings about different Minnesota sports. Welcome to those of you who might be tuning in for the first time, and certainly welcome to those of you who check us out every week on 365sportscast.com and also on YouTube. I had everything all figured out. I was going to talk about all these changes coming in Major League Baseball in another year, the pitch clock, bigger bases, no shifts, all that stuff. But I had such a fantastic interview with a couple gentlemen who are also here on 365sportscast.com that we took plenty of time talking about NFL football. So we are going to be spending a little extra time on the interview this week than we normally do, and that's just fine. So sit back, relax, prepare yourself for another helping of waffles, syrup optional. My interview this week, coming right up right now, is the Packer brothers. They are on noon Eastern here on 365sportscast.com, and we're talking about the state of the green and gold with the re-signing of Aaron Rodgers and also how that impacts our Minnesota Vikings. We are coming up with that right now. All right, I'm joined here this week by Joe and Jared Lights. They host another program here on 365sportscast.com, the Packer brothers, Mondays at noon Eastern time. You can also find them on Spotify, various other places. Maybe you guys want to welcome, first of all, but maybe you want to fill in where everybody can listen to your show.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Thanks for having us on.
Go ahead, Joe. Tell them.
It's great to be able to do this with another host and program on the 365 Sportscast. But like Mark said, you can find us on 365 at noon on Mondays, and then we're on every podcast platform.
Okay.
Spotify, Google, Apple, Anchor, all those. So a couple that I don't think anybody uses.
So I've never heard of Anchor before, but we're all learning together. So
Anchor let us do it. So I figured, why not?
Okay, there you go. So you guys started some time ago on that, on Spotify, these other places with your podcast. There's a lot of podcasts out there. What drove you guys to say, hey, we want to do this too, and we can offer this that is unique to Packer fans?
The coolest part about it is I'm doing it with my brother. So yeah. I don't know. I feel like we were both just grew up Packer fans, and it was just meant to be. And we were together on a holiday. We took the picture for our artwork, and it was just, let's do this thing.
Yeah, I've been wanting to start a podcast for a couple of years now. Back when I was in college, I wanted to start one on like college scouting and kind of like a pre-draft centric podcast. But I just kind of lacked the know-how and the initiative at the time. And then during the shutdown is when I was like, let's just do this. And I was like, okay, I don't necessarily want to do the draft centric one. And then I asked my brother if he wanted to do a Packer centric podcast with me, since we're both Packer fans, and thankfully he agreed.
Yeah. And you're stuck in Ohio. Maybe not stuck. You live in Ohio, and I assume there's plenty of other Packer fans around. You guys aren't just an island out in the middle of a vast ocean.
They kind of pop up everywhere, it seems like. But
yeah.
Definitely a lot of Browns fans here.
A lot of disgruntled Browns fans.
Well, a lot of angry people.
It's hard to be as a Vikings fan. I sometimes think we've got it rough, but then I look around and go, well,
it could be worse.
It could be a lot worse.
It could always be worse.
Yeah.
Unless you're Cleveland.
Well, yeah.
It seems.
Even Cleveland, they seem like they had their 1 year, and now they're kind of on the downward trend.
They figured it out.
Well, they got, what did I see this week? They might get Amari Cooper. That might happen.
They did.
It looked like it was finalized. Yeah, last I saw.
And now Jarvis wants to come back.
Yeah. When the official season, I suppose Wednesday, they can make all that official kind of stuff. But, I discovered too, I was thinking, how in the world would you do a Packer podcast 52 weeks out of the year? But then I remembered visiting some friends in Wisconsin, and they told me that it's no joke that 365 days out of the year, there's Packer news on the television, period.
Oh, I bet.
That's how important that is.
I believe it. Some of our most popular podcasts were last summer too.
Okay.
So yeah, they turn out and watch.
There's
Love it.
or listen.
For being a Vikings fan and not, of course, Packers are our biggest rivals, but the respect that I have for Packer fans and their ability to, no matter what, good or bad, stick by, and certainly the waiting list for season tickets at Lambeau is indication of that. So
yeah,
definitely.
Yeah.
And I mean, even though, we're not gonna make any bones about it. We don't like the Vikings, of course, but it's good to have an opponent that can actually give you a run for your money, especially here in most recent years, where if we play the Vikings,
it's always a toss up. We're winning this game. It's
not like the Lions or the Bears of recent, where it's just like, okay, we expect to win this game,
exactly,
pretty easily.
Well, you guys were probably as excited as a lot of Vikings fan to see Mike Zimmer get fired, because he seemed to have the Packers number. I mean,
it's like he had Rodgers figured out or something. He gave him fits.
Yeah. So,
I like Zimmer, so the fact that you guys let him go, I was like,
I was surprised.
I like Zimmer.
What we discovered, or what a lot of Vikings fans seem to think, is he's that old school kind of guy, and he really struggled to communicate with the players. That seemed to be the theme. And in today's NFL,
I'm sure it has a lot to do with it now.
Yeah, it's a different world. So
what was it like?
Oh, go ahead, Jared. Sorry.
What was it like being a Vikings fan when you seen Rodgers get re-signed? Well, it's kind of like crap. Did you expect it?
Well, it's a little bit of that, and this is you led right to my first nitty gritty type question. Certainly, we were on pins and needles here too, kind of waiting to see. Everything was on hold in the NFL until the Aaron Rodgers decision. What's going to happen with him?
Yep.
And then, of course, I wondered too if Rodgers got a little perturbed that he got kind of upended on the news of the day when all of a sudden, as soon as he signed, Russell Wilson gets traded to the Denver Broncos. Whoops, sorry, Aaron, you're not the top story anymore. There's a mixed part of this, and you guys can comment too a little bit. Aaron Rodgers is a great quarterback. There's no doubt about it. One of the absolute best in the league. And he's a struggle for the Vikings, especially in recent years where our defense isn't nearly as good as it used to be. But at the same time, who in the world can you guys sign anymore now? I mean, is he going to have to walk out there and punt too? Is just stay out there?
Well, I don't think that contract was legitimate. I think they came out and said that. I don't think anyone knows what the actual numbers are yet, do they?
Because he did.
I haven't seen any numbers.
I read a report saying he wants to be friendly to bring some of his people back.
Okay. Well, that would make sense.
I don't know if that's true. It'd make a lot. I would hope so. I mean, what's he need the biggest contract for anymore? He's already done it twice.
Yeah.
He won a Super Bowl run here.
Yeah, the biggest contract thing is kind of just a smokescreen anyways. It's just to be able to say, oh, I'm making $50 million a year. I'm the top of market quarterback. It's really just all about the guaranteed money. And you can spread that out over the duration of the contract. So he might sign a huge contract and they can just backload the guaranteed money to help the roster now. That's what I'm assuming they're going to do. If not, that doesn't make any sense.
No.
So that's where I think they're going to go with it. And who knows if it's a really 2-year deal with a few years at the end where they kind of just spread out the money and they really only expect him to stay for 2. I don't think there's any realistic. I don't think anybody really thinks Rodgers is going to play 4 more years.
Right. Well, today in the Minneapolis Star-Tribune, there was of course, Kirk Cousins is on the same spectrum as far as contract and everything, but they talked about voidable years, something that's used sometimes where you put all these voidable years on there. That's that sort of situation where, we can put some of that money elsewhere, not pay you as much now. You're going to get your money at some point in time. And that would make sense for the Packers because the window is there, right? I mean, Devontae Adams franchised. One would assume they might want to try to figure out a longer term deal than that. Is that something you guys hear about, think about?
Yeah, definitely. We always want Devontae back. Even if Rodgers ain't there, we actually talked about that. He's one we gotta lock him up for sure. You don't just go find another Devontae Adams.
No.
And he's got the skill set that you could sign him to another, 3-4 year contract, and you can expect him to produce about the same because he's not a receiver that relies on elite athletic traits. So it'd be nice to have him around for 3 or 4 more years when when Aaron Rodgers. Same thing now. He's
it's like kind of the same situation.
But it'd be nice to have him around once Rodgers is gone.
Well, as long as you Freudian slip Brett Favre in there.
Gotta get Brett in here.
Who's better, Brett or Aaron?
Aaron's light year. I think light years ahead of Favre. Like, I love Favre. He's the Iron Man. But Aaron Rodgers' talent's just far beyond Favre. You know, he's...
Yeah, I grew up on Favre. So I love
Favre. That's not taking anything away.
Right.
But Aaron's definitely the better quarterback, I think.
Aaron's just good, man. Yeah. That TD interception ratio. Favre, you live by Favre or die by Favre.
Exactly. Well, we found that out in the 2009 NFC Championship.
Yeah. Well, they also had a hit out on his head, so that doesn't help either.
I said when Sean Payton stepped back from being coach of the Saints is that I might be able to root for the Saints occasionally now, because that was pretty tough. And
I really think the Vikings
we wanted Favre to get that one too, so we were rooting for you guys.
Yeah, well, I think so too. I think that the Colts were ready for the picking, and I don't know. I still 12 men in the huddle. Jeepers, come on! That the worst thing ever. Because having Longwell as our kicker, I was confident that kick was going to go through. That there was no doubt in my mind.
Another former Packer there too.
Another former Packer. Yeah.
yeah,
of course. And that would have been the bittersweet to win a Super Bowl having to use a couple of Packers to do it. But
we'll take the cake there.
There wasn't a break really between Longwell and who we have now, Mason Crosby. So it's pretty much seamless there with the kicking situation. So
last year got a little sketchy though.
Kickers and quarterbacks, we've been spoiled
real sketchy
for the most part.
Year.
Was it the Bengals game where Longwell or there you go Crosby?
There you go.
Oh my goodness, that was difficult to watch.
On both ends. I love how the Bengals kicker, I forget his name, he's that young rookie.
Oh, McPherson?
Yeah, McPherson, that's it. Yeah. How he was celebrating, he thought he made the kick. Turns out he missed. He hit the flag and he had to turn back around.
Because I think it went over top of the flag, like right over the goal post.
Yeah.
But you mentioned Cousins. I was just looking up his numbers before the pod, and he's got a $45 million cap hit this year.
Yeah.
That is huge.
That is massive.
That's like top of market. Like, I think he might be the highest paid quarterback this year in terms of his cap hit.
Right. And the difficulty, just like if the initial reports about Rodgers' contract were there, would have been accurate, would have been, who else are you getting now? How can you fill out, for the Vikings at least, defense is certainly pretty sketchy. That has to change. Still need offensive line help. But who can you go out and sign and fill those holes when Cousins eats up so much? And by all indications, the Vikings would like to redo it, extend him. The idea that Kirk Cousins right now, with Tom Brady retiring, Russell Wilson out of the NFC, guys like that, Kirk Cousins is one of the best quarterbacks in the NFC right now.
Yep.
There's just, skill-wise, he's right there. But just like what you said with Rodgers, if you can't sign anybody else, what's the use of it? And so it's a problem. And, you're looking at, Devontae Adams, fantastic receiver, but we got one of our own in Justin Jefferson.
Yeah.
You like to sign that guy to a long-term deal. But if you don't have a solid quarterback, why would Justin Jefferson stay here?
Yeah.
Why would he go somewhere else when he becomes a free agent?
True. You'd probably have to be like, hey, we're going to give you top of market receiver money, and we hope that's enough because we're not going to compete.
Yeah. Because there's Kellen Mond, by all indications, the quarterback we drafted last year just isn't anywhere close to being ready. Jordan Love might be closer to being ready than Mond is. But and where do you go find somebody? Now, the Vikings could still trade Kirk Cousins. That's certainly on the board. Sniffing around with Indianapolis. That's out there. Seattle has popped up as a possibility. And the Vikings are part of the Deshaun Watson sweepstakes. Apparently, he's one of the teams that they.
Yeah, I was just seeing that.
Yeah, he'd waive his no trade clause for, and that's an intriguing possibility.
He's a stud.
But what do you have to give up to get him?
Yeah, he's going to want. Yeah. Well, he hasn't played either, though. So,
right.
Does he have money trailing with him if he leaves?
I haven't looked that close
Yes.
into it.
He does. There have to be something.
Well, he just signed a new contract with the Texans, so he's 4 years locked in under contract. So if the Texans would trade him to the Vikings would just assume that contract, and they have control of Watson for 4 years, which is great. And I have his cap numbers here. This year it's 35 mil cap hit. Next year 37, 24, 32, and 25, 32. So if you're getting Deshaun Watson in 24 and 25 at a $32 million cap hit, at that time, after the cap explodes,
right,
you're going to be getting Watson on a deal.
Yeah.
Is he going to want to restructure that contract and get paid more? Probably. But it's something to consider, especially when you're paying Kirk Cousins 45, and he's going to be a free agent next year.
Right. And Deshaun Watson is a better quarterback.
I hope you guys don't do it. I hope you don't.
That would be, well, the analogy is when everybody thought Jim Harbaugh was going to become our coach, and everybody's just thinking Jim Harbaugh, and then it fell through, and now people are getting on that Deshaun Watson train, and then I don't think it's going to happen. I mean, they'd take Kirk off our hands. I can't imagine you do it any other way than Kirk Cousins goes to Houston for a year.
Yeah, definitely.
But I can imagine at least one first round, maybe 2 first round draft picks along with that.
I think it's 2 minimum. Yeah.
Because he's young enough. And
Russell got what? 2 firsts, 2 seconds, and
they sent a lot for Wilson.
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
And then players.
He's not getting younger either.
Well, that's just it. And he didn't have a great year this year, Russell Wilson, but
it wasn't terrible, but it wasn't eye popping at all.
No. And so you wonder,
subpar.
Yeah. And part of it to me is always coaching. Did Pete Carroll get the absolute best out of Russell Wilson?
Probably not in the last few years.
They
didn't have the roster they had before either.
Right.
I think you could make the case that Seattle kind of wasted Russell Wilson the last few years, the same way that Packers fans think Rodgers, a little bit of his prime was wasted by the front office here.
Yeah.
Right.
But it also comes after we pay Rodgers too.
Because they relied on Russell for so much. They're just like, hey, Russell, go win us games. Like, go do everything for us. It's just what we did with Rodgers for so long.
Right.
And it just doesn't work like that in the league. So
what happens if, let's say Rodgers does play 4 more years and there's not another Super Bowl trophy on the shelf? I mean, who gets that blame? Where does that fall? I mean, heads would roll. I can't imagine.
We have a lot of really bad NFC Championship losses, and I think in a lot of those losses, Rodgers takes the heat. He plays better than what people say he does in the playoffs. Granted, this year, scoring 10 points, there's no excuse for that. But there's a lot of years where something else falls through, and he gets him back in it. Defense was a problem for a lot of years where we just blew it. Special teams this year sure didn't help us. It's always that one little X factor that is our kryptonite at the end of the year. We even talked about the special teams this year. Like, that's going to be the reason watch. And sure enough, special teams was terrible in the NFC or the playoff game this year.
Yeah. And I think in years past, you might be able to blame the front office more just because Ted Thompson era, there was, they didn't really chase after free agents as much, or, sign those players on the margins to make your team like that little bit better all around. But since Gutekunst has been here, he's been doing everything he can to make this roster the best possible. So I would give the front office the least amount of blame for what's gone on recently. I'd say it's all Rodgers and LaFleur, because LaFleur, for how good he's been, you and Rodgers together, you got to come up with more than 10 points in a divisional round against a wild card team.
Right. And you can have this shows that margin of error in the NFL. You can have the best team in the league, but like you say, those little things make such a difference in how hard it is to win consistently.
Yeah.
And I think when we look, LaFleur has been a fantastic regular season coach.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And maybe there's something where come playoffs, I don't know. His game plan isn't there, or whatever. And there's a lot of coaches certainly, but
or they don't game plan accordingly, then they have to change.
Yeah,
or they just don't make the right adjustments.
Or does he rely on Rodgers too much? Does he kind of revert back to, all right, Rodgers, like, you're you, so whatever you think's best for the offense, let's do it. Because I mean, Rodgers hasn't been. I know there's a lot of plays you can look at in just the divisional round where you could probably look at Rodgers and be like, "What are you doing? He was open. Like, why are you forcing the ball to Devontae?"
Yeah, it was bad.
And is that a Matt LaFleur thing? Probably not. That was probably Rodgers saying, "I'm getting it to my guy, or I'm going to change it to line, and I think this is the best play."
Yeah, and when you have an Aaron Rodgers, you like you say, you kind of tend to trust him, rely on him.
Yeah. And we've lived by that. I mean, I don't mind it, but in certain times, it can come back to bite you.
Yeah. And you know, we've talked about Rodgers, Devontae Adams. You guys have a rock solid running game too, and really, with Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon kind of emerging a little bit more this year too. It's not just we're going to rely on one guy. Like when Delvin Cook goes down for the Vikings,
who's next?
Madison was okay, but he's not Delvin Cook.
Yeah. I mean, and Dalvin Cook, first of all, he's just amazing.
He's a stud.
Yeah.
Love to have him on any team that I have. But I know Madison got a lot of credit. And I think that more came from like the fantasy world, because a lot of times he'd produce in fantasy. So people always saw him as I mean, fantasy wise, he would put up the same amount of points as Dalvin Cook would in a game. But I think that might have overshadowed his actual value or quality. Because like you were saying, as a Vikings fan, you don't think he was even close to Dalvin Cook.
No, not at all. Not at all.
So, but a lot of people might think he was close just because of his fantasy production.
Yeah. I'm sure other teams you're playing know it too.
Right.
They plan differently when Dalvin Cook's not playing.
Of course. Cook has that breakaway, that home run ability that Madison doesn't. And you'd hear over and over again, well, Alexander Madison could start for a lot of teams in the NFL. Well, yeah, maybe. But I look at it like Jerick McKinnon, you know, he had a great year for the Vikings one year, and injuries played a part in his, you know, his kind of downfall. But he had one great year, and he just he had a good offensive line that year, and some things broke his way, but he hasn't done anything since. So I think Madison will end up somewhere else eventually, and then I guess we'll see. And somebody will draft him way too high in a fantasy draft. Because number one running back. So
Joe.
No, he was my handcuff. I have Dalvin in one of my leagues, and Madison's my handcuff. So
that's like I had Ezekiel Elliott and I had to have Tony Pollard, but from week to week I never knew. Geez, I should have probably started Pollard half the time. But,
same way with Jones and Dillon. Some weeks you're better off starting Dillon.
What I love about those two is they're completely different animals. Jones is that elusive, catch a ball out of the backfield, and then AJ Dillon's just down your throat.
Yeah, he's hard to tackle.
It's a good duo. They both do very good things for what they're supposed to do.
And that's what you want, I think, as an NFL franchise. You bring that change of pace guy in there, and it's harder for the defense to respond to that because they are so different.
You don't want to tackle that guy.
Well,
I thought it sucks he got hurt in that game in the playoffs.
I think that was a factor
really
that was
hurt us.
Overlooked. Like that, he was going to be really important to us, and the fact that he couldn't play.
Snow came down. It was AJ Dillon's time, but didn't get it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Question for you. Going back to the quarterback situation, in terms of your guys' team building, would you rather extend Kirk Cousins, or say trade him for Deshaun Watson and kind of build your team that way, or maybe another quarterback? A trade.
Yeah, I've been kind of adamant on this show that, there are times where I've said, go ahead, trade Cousins. If you could get, I was willing to take Baker Mayfield, because I think injuries, played a big role this year for him.
Definitely.
Derek Carr, that name was floated around. I'd take Derek Carr, just for the fact that you can build the roster better. Because they don't cost nearly as much. At the same time, when Watson's name comes up, if you are assured that I mean, he's didn't get indicted and everything, but you're assured that the other stuff isn't going to cost him half a season or something. Boy, that seems worth it. It seems worth
sure does, man.
Giving up because we just you guys know this sitting across the border. You've had 2 quarterbacks in the time that we've had a couple of 13, 14, it seems like, and to have that stability there, to have a Deshaun Watson who is an elite quarterback and can take that next step. Listen, Kirk Cousins is very good. He's a good quarterback. He's one of the most accurate quarterbacks you're going to have. And you mix him with a Delvin Cook and a Justin Jefferson, you've got weapons out there.
Adam Thielen.
Although Thielen's cap hit could mean he might be somewhere else next year. He's getting kind of expensive for a guy in his 30s now.
Yeah, he's just under 17. I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah. So that's, it'll be really interesting come the opening of the league season. And by the time my show airs on Wednesday, we'll know a lot more. But Thielen could be gone. Barr could be gone on the defense, and that's fine. He's been hurt too much. Michael Pierce could be gone. A lot of these guys could be gone. And now you're saying, are we rebuilding? Or do we still think we have, are you better off going 10-7 and being a wild card, or trying to build something? And that's a tough question that our new leadership has to answer.
Yeah.
I was just seeing Danielle Hunter trade rumors when I was looking before the show too.
Yeah. And that's hard.
And Cook rumors.
I think everything's up in the air. You've got new GM, new coach, and they're going to look at everything. They're going to say, we're listening. And it's just difficult. To sit through a 4-13 season or something like that and try to rebuild would be really, really difficult to do. But at the same time, if you felt assured that, hey, we're going to have a prolonged series of great years, okay, I don't know. Can I see a Super Bowl at some point in the next decade?
Yeah.
Even getting there, my goodness, I don't know.
That's what it's all about, too.
Right.
The hardest part is you got to have a quarterback. Otherwise, it's kind of out of the question,
So I'm fine with Watson. I'm also okay. I've come around to the idea if you can extend Cousins, if he takes a discount, which it doesn't sound like he wants to do. I mean, he's all about himself and the money, and that's kind of tough to swallow too.
Yeah.
So, boy, if you can't form a good team around him and you can't extend a Justin Jefferson, and keep those guys around, what's the point then?
Right. He's just going to try to milk you for everything.
Yeah. And so that it feels like he's more, and some of the things we saw this year, and you guys experienced that a little bit with Rodgers, of it's all about me and not in the best interest of the team all the time. Both of them had some vaccination questions about them and whatever. And it's like, just be upfront, guys. Just
it's an NFC North thing.
Well, I guess so. Yeah. You guys, was there ever any thought in your minds that Rodgers wouldn't be in a Packer uniform this year? Was that ever seriously a consideration?
Not me. I've been saying it the whole time he's staying.
I've always thought
maybe a little denial in that, but
I always thought it was a small possibility, but it just never made sense. So that's when I was like, it's a possibility, but it's not. I don't think it's realistic.
Where's he going to go?
Just because
we have a good roster, we really do.
I think the only team that I saw he could go to, and maybe he wouldn't even be better off. It'd be an okay trade, is to Tennessee, because I think they're ready to compete now with him. I don't even if he went to Denver, I don't think Denver's ready to compete in the AFC for a championship.
No.
So why would he want to go somewhere and waste the end of his career
in that stacked QB lineup in AFC? There's so many good quarterbacks over there.
Right. So if it wasn't Tennessee, I'm like, he's either retiring or he's coming back.
Yeah.
Which also
Tennessee is that one. I mean, they get there and then they sort of,
yeah. And we're talking about Tannehill and Rodgers. Like, you got to think that's got to put us over the hump, right?
You would think.
I would think so. I agree. I never thought Denver made sense. Why would you go to the AFC West of all places?
And go against
Pat Mahomes
and Chargers. His name is escaping me.
Herbert.
Herbert. Yep. Yeah, he's really good. So
yeah,
he's young too. He's going to be a stud.
Another thing about Rodgers is with this new deal, the 4-year deal, I don't understand how you go from on the cusp of considering retirement to signing a deal where you intend to play 4 more years. How are you? Oh, I might retire, or I might play 4 more years.
Right.
Maybe he didn't want to play somewhere else. He was waiting to see if I want to play here. I think there had to be a bigger picture, like behind
that's why
the
I think
scenes.
it's got to be like a 2-year deal max for Rodgers, because I don't know how you can consider retirement and then go, oh, I'll just play 4 more years.
Being that old too, it's hard to commit for 4 years.
Yeah.
So
when you guys look and the Vikings hired Kevin O'Connell, and he's part of that Rams coaching tree from which you guys plucked Matt LaFleur as well.
Mm-hmm.
Any initial impressions where you say, well, this guy could be the real deal, or wow, good luck, guys. Not sure if you got the right guy.
Well, with the Rams had a lot of good skill players too, but he was able to use them effectively. So if you apply that same logic to Minnesota, I don't see any reason why he couldn't come in and have their offense be really, really good, which to us Packer fans is we don't want that.
Right, of course.
So in that aspect, I think coming from a coach with like Zimmer, where I know he didn't have his hands in the offense probably at all. I don't even know who your guys' OC was last year.
Yeah, it changed every single year, it seemed like. The only hand Zimmer had in the offense was he'd complain if we didn't run the ball enough. He wanted to run the ball.
Which could be fair if you got to
that's not a bad
Dalvin Cook.
You do, but when you keep saying that publicly and everybody knows it, and then it's pretty easy to game plan for the Vikings.
Yeah, it's true. Or Kirk Cousins like, no, we're not running.
No.
But to have an offensive mind like O'Connell come in with all these skill players you have.
It's a new school mentality coming.
I think that's great for you guys.
It'll probably be fun.
I think so too. I think
it'll be fun.
We needed a change, and that was right there. Do you guys have any fear about the Bears or the Lions over the next few years at all?
No.
No.
I think we can all agree on that.
Not in the immediate. Nope.
See, I think Detroit has a little bit more possibility if you either turn Goff around or you find a different quarterback, which again, as we've talked about, hard to find good quarterbacks. But I think they have the right coach in place. Yep. I think they have a guy who's
even a lot of their losses were very hard losses, hard fought. They were right there in a lot of games. They could have easily been a 8-9 win team. Maybe
they lost to the Ravens on a 60-something yard field goal at the end, and
Justin Tucker
like that.
With the old golden boot, Justin Tucker out there.
Yeah, should have beat the Vikings twice, not just once. We got lucky there. I think the Lions are closer than the Bears, but again, the Bears have a whole new regime too, but clearly the Packers, with Rodgers back, cream of the crop. I think, barring some great move by the Vikings defensively to figure a few things out. As much as it pains me to say, I would pick the Packers to win the NFC North as it stands right now.
I think you guys will find a way to make that wild card, though. If you stay healthy.
Along those same lines as the Lions, who were competitive and were kind of gritty. How do you feel about the Vikings when they gave away a lot of close games, and they could have easily had 2-3 more wins than they actually did, and that would have got them in the playoffs?
It would have, and that's coaching, and that's where Zimmer lost things. Was his game management, his clock management was terrible as far as calling timeouts, when to challenge things like that. There's some that you can't help. We had the Cardinals on the ropes, miss a field goal as time expires, a makeable field goal, like 37 yards or something, and that's the Vikings' curse. But you had that opportunity. But a lot of other ones where you just let it slip away, and I pinned that on a coach. I say you didn't do things correctly down the stretch, and you're gonna listen. In the course of a season, you're gonna lose a game like that, and that's what happens. You lose a game you probably should win, but the Vikings didn't win nearly enough games that they maybe shouldn't have. The ones where to be a good team, you have to beat a team that you shouldn't beat.
Yeah.
You have to kind of take that step. And so, to beat the Packers when you play them twice, to beat them once, to me is not taking that step. You've got to beat the best 2 times in your division if you're going to take the division back, and that's just how it rolls. So
did you guys sweep the other 2? Did you sweep?
No, split with Detroit. Now I got to think about
Split
it.
with us.
Yeah,
Split with us.
Beat the Bears twice. I'm almost positive. Yeah.
So do you think the Vikings overachieved or underachieved last year? Or somewhere in the middle? Were they about the team that we expected them to be?
Before the season, I predicted 7-10. They finished 8-9. So I guess they overachieved. When I looked at their schedule and I said, "Holy cow! How in the world are you going to, play the NFC West and come out of there unscathed? How are you going to do things like that?" And I just
the NFC North too, or AFC North, which is a tough division,
right? But even there, we lost to the Browns 14-7 at home.
Mm-hmm.
It stings when you guys score 10 points in a playoff game at Lambeau, but there's no way the Vikings offense should only score 7 points against the Cleveland Browns.
Right.
And that was on the first drive of the game. And they didn't score.
Just an ugly game.
You can't have games like that. You could lose to the Browns in a shootout. But you can't have a game like that.
Mm-hmm.
They only scored 14 after all. So
yeah. So it's tough to swallow that. So when Zimmer was showing the door, I think a lot more of us were surprised that Rick Spielman, the GM, was fired as well. But again, they needed a whole new regime in there, and that's what you have to take a chance on and try to
press the reset button.
Yeah. Something you guys haven't really had to do a whole lot of, and
no, we just reload
quarterback players. So.
Right. And when Rodgers goes, who knows? I mean, they have to be thinking if Jordan Love isn't the guy.
Part of me wanted to say, get Watson. If we're not going to get Rodgers back, let's get Watson.
Nope. That never crossed my mind.
If we had Watson, that'd be another quite a few years of stellar quarterback play. We're built to win.
Yeah, and that whole Jordan Love thing is a whole other subject that we could talk forever about.
It's stupid we drafted him. I feel bad for that kid.
Yeah. Well, he was in where Rodgers was when he got drafted.
Yeah, but Rodgers handled it a lot better than Favre did. He kind of learned, don't be a jerk.
Right.
And those first few years were pretty bad.
Sometimes I think they rushed these. Rodgers sat there for 3 years and then became a great quarterback.
Probably
Sometimes
the best thing that could have happened to him.
They throw these guys out there and, well, okay, it's a 50-50 shot on whether they're going to turn out. You look at Daniel Jones in New York. Would sitting on the bench for a couple of years and learning how the NFL works have helped that guy? Probably.
Mm-hmm.
But then you have a Mac Jones in New England who comes out and does what he has to do to win. Yeah. Not flashy, but he does what he has to do to win. So
next step, sustaining that and growing from it.
Yeah.
And I feel bad for some of these college quarterbacks because it's not even their fault. It's just the premium position that quarterback is. They're forced into that role. Look at the Browns did it for years. Look how many first-round quarterbacks they burnt through that people thought were going to be really good. But you throw them in there to the Wolves, and it's like you can't expect them to thrive or maybe even develop correctly.
Especially if they had a bad offensive line there for years too. It's kind of shot does a young kid have when he has no protection.
Is Daniel Jones a first-round quarterback? I don't think so, but his value as a quarterback, the positional value, forced him into the top of the draft.
Right.
So you kind of just the teams and the quarterbacks get stuck into that. You kind of have to do it.
Yeah. One last question for you guys, then I'll let you go. Just long term, your lifetime as Packer fans, everything else, not necessarily just recent years. Bigger rival, Vikings or Bears for the Packers?
Recent history,
Just,
Vikings.
everything, your whole lifetime, if you look at it, kind of say from the Packer perspective.
From the Packers perspective, I would say the Bears.
Yeah.
From my perspective, I would say the Vikings.
That's how I
in my lifetime. I feel like we've had better games against the Vikings, and they gave us more trouble. Because I remember growing up watching, Dante Culpepper and Randy Moss, and Minnesota was a lot of fun to watch. Chris Carter. So to me, it's the Vikings, but overall, I'd say it has to be the Bears for the Packers in general.
Right.
The Bears had a short-lived little stint where I think on our Super Bowl run we played them in the NFC Championship game, but since then they haven't been relevant at all.
Right.
Yeah, they've been pretty bad.
I remember when the Vikings got Cousins. Was that the year we went to that game? Was that the first year Cousins was there?
No, they didn't have Cousins that year.
They didn't?
I forgot who they had. 2016, who was your guys' quarterback?
Oh, goodness.
Oh, it was that. Wasn't it that guy that won that the Super Bowl as a backup? Like the year before that.
It was the run the table year. It was Christmas Eve.
I know who it is.
Well, if Mark doesn't know, we are not.
I'm blanking. Past Case Keenum, I'm blanking on my quarterbacks right now, but we'll remember it when the show is over.
So, of course we will.
Guarantee it.
But no, definitely. I remember the hype behind the Cousins, and I remember when Zimmer first got there. Like that was you guys were really good that year.
Well, it was kind of
this fan.
They thought Cousins was the next step after being in the NFC Championship game to have a great quarterback. They thought. And in reality, it hamstrung them so that they can't have all the other players that you need. Whereas Case Keenum got you there, and you had some other great players around him, but that's how it works. So, well, Joe and Jared Lights, you can follow them on the various streaming platforms. You can listen to them, 365sportscast.com, noon Eastern on Mondays. Guys, thanks so much for joining us here on Whatever Flips Your Waffle.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. And 2016, is that Sam Bradford?
There you go.
There it is.
All right.
Thanks for your time, Mark.
All right.
Appreciate
Thank you. And now it's time for the State of Minnesota Sports. You know, it's funny, we just got done talking to the Packer brothers for the interview you just heard. That was Sunday afternoon. We got done talking, and of course we talked a lot about Kirk Cousins and possibilities, and then a couple hours later, whoa, big news. Kirk Cousins signs the extension for the Vikings. As I kind of had been suspecting more and more would happen. That doesn't mean the whole saga is over yet, and who knows, by the time I record this, between now, which is Tuesday evening, and Wednesday when you hear it, things could change again. Who knows? We got a lot to talk about in Minnesota sports, so let's get to it. We'll get to the Vikings and the Twins a little bit later since they have the bulk of the news this week. Let's start here. Our Gopher women's basketball team isn't quite done yet. They will play in the women's NIT tournament. Despite a record of 14-17, they got invited to go over to Green Bay and play a game Thursday evening at 7 o'clock. And, hey, you know what? Anytime you get a chance to play a little bit more and get a little more experience against quality teams is a good thing, and I'm sure Coach Lindsay Whalen will have her team ready to play, whether it's a one-and-done or not. Again, another opportunity for the Gopher ladies to play some meaningful basketball. You know, they got in because, for one thing, they had beaten a team that did end up getting in the NCAA women's tournament, and, you know, that's one notch in their belt. They're able to say, hey, yeah, this is a good thing for us. The Minnesota Timberwolves the other night, Karl Anthony Towns, 60 points. That's unbelievable. That's a huge amount of points for anybody to put in a game. It's not Wilt Chamberlain-like. But, you know, the way the game is played today, that's pretty impressive. And Towns had a great game and had some fun with it, too. You know, his teammates said, hey, you're going to keep shooting until you get to 60. You need to do that. And in a game that's, you know, in hand anyway, that's a fun thing to be able to do. And it seems like the Timberwolves have had more games like that this season than in recent history. And again, they're sitting there and they're probably going to end up in that play-in tournament, barring some kind of a run here in the last month of the season. But I tell you what, if they can make it through that play-in tournament, do you want to play the Minnesota Timberwolves, who when they get hot are really, really solid as a basketball team? They've beaten a lot of the teams ahead of them, and so I don't think anybody's hoping the Timberwolves make it into that. I don't think anybody wants to play them in a series where they could very well come through and knock things off, and we'll see how that turns out. The Wild, meanwhile, continue their slide. They might win a game here and there, but they have slid into a tie with Nashville for the kind of that wild card or that last spot above the wild card within their division. And so again, the Wild have to move here, have to make some things happen. again, playoff positioning is a lot of things. You can be a team like the Timberwolves that could end up in the number 7 seed in the NBA and put a little bit of fear into the number 2 seed. Hockey seems to be a little bit different, though. It's not that you can't, but people were expecting the Wild to be a higher seed than what they would sit at right now. And so when that disappointment sets in, then there's a little urgency, and that makes you play your game a little differently. Whereas the Timberwolves, when they get to the playoffs, they've got nothing to lose, nothing at all. And so, go out there and you can do some different things and catch a lot of people by surprise if that happens. It is a great time of the year. The NCAA tournament is starting. One of my favorite sporting events to watch. Even as a teacher, sometimes I find ways to have kids working on stuff, and we can watch some ball games too. And it's just so much fun to see all these different things and how they all work out. So, like everybody else, I fill out my own set of brackets, of course, and do my best, even though I don't watch all these teams and I don't always have the best knowledge of everything of what's going on. But I thought I would share with you, here are my brackets that I have. And whether or not you think I'm crazy or what, sometimes you just got to take a few chances. However, I didn't take a lot of chances because my Final Four is all the number 1 seeds, Gonzaga, Baylor, Arizona, and Kansas. I had a hard time picking against some of those, and I know that they're not all going to be there in the end, but it was like, well, which one am I going to take out? Kansas is one I considered, but I have some upsets coming through the bottom part of that bracket. I've got Wisconsin and USC playing in the Sweet 16, and so I thought, I can't pick one of those to beat. I always kind of like Wisconsin and the style of play that they run, but I can't pick them to beat Kansas. I have Purdue and Kentucky over playing Baylor, and again, it was kind of like, well, jeepers, I have a hard time picking against Baylor. I really think the Duke run, I got Duke into the Sweet 16, into the Elite 8, losing to Gonzaga, but I just have this really weird feeling that they're going to get knocked out earlier. It's been a year of early knockouts. They lose to North Carolina in their home finale, lose in the tournament championship there, and just there's something off. There's a lot of pressure, I think, on those guys to give Coach K one last run, and maybe they'll come together. But something tells me that I maybe have them going too far into the Elite 8. I end up having Arizona beating Gonzaga in the finals. I think it's Arizona's year to do that. And, again, the great thing about the tournament is you can be a great basketball mind and you still might be completely off on what it is that you think because they play some weird games. It's a lot of fun. On the women's side of the bracket, I got it mixed up a little bit. I only have one number 1 seed making it to the Final Four, and that's Stanford. And I also have UConn. I think, with Paige Beckers back healthy, UConn's a 2 seed. And if you are North Carolina State, you're going, what in the world did we do to deserve this? And those games could be played in Connecticut, of all places. The committee wants UConn to get to the Final Four, Beckers to play in her home state, Minnesota, at Target Center. I also have Iowa and Baylor, both number 2 seeds, making it. I actually have Baylor winning it all over Stanford this year. Stanford won last year, and I think Iowa, though, is playing so well right now, the women, and they're going to make a run here and represent the Big Ten really well. Now, in another month, you might be able to come back and say, boy, Mark, those were some really dumb picks, and we'll just have to wait and see. So let's get to the big stuff here. The Twins, the Vikings, Kirk Cousins extended another year. That helps the cap hit. And now they have some wiggle room, which they had to have. And they're already making some moves. They released Michael Pierce. He's been injured. He opted out because of COVID 2 years ago. He wasn't what they had hoped he would be. And so they let him go, and instead they signed Harrison Phillips from Buffalo, and hopefully that he'll be healthy and be able to do a few things on that defensive line and bolster that. Fresh on Tuesday, too, was a deal with linebacker Jordan Hicks from Arizona, and he turns 30 but plays at a really high level. A lot of tackles, had some sacks in there, too, and we'll kind of see that they're changing their defense with Ed Donatel as the new defensive coordinator, and so they're going to switch things up. Hicks would be somebody who plays in the same spot as Eric Kendricks in the old defense, but things are changing. And so hopefully, again, this idea that Kirk Cousins can lead them to the promised land, I'm still dubious on that. But again, what are your options when it comes down to it? As we talked about with the Packer brothers, boy, if you get a Deshaun Watson, go for it. But you have to make a decision. Do we think we can win now? And that seems to be the path the Vikings are taking. And again, with new head coach Kevin O'Connell, maybe the offense will be able to produce at the level you would expect with a Kirk Cousins, a Dalvin Cook, a Justin Jefferson. Time will tell. But I think they're going to give this a couple of years, and the reality of maybe we can find a young quarterback, develop that young quarterback to replace Cousins. We just have to wait and see. On the other hand, maybe Cousins brings you to the Super Bowl. It's possible. And if so, well, you make that run and you do it for all it's worth. But like we talked about, boy, if you're not going to try to win, why would a kid like Justin Jefferson stick around? Why would he want to stay here and sign a long-term contract if you're not going to try to win? Money goes so far, but boy, these guys want to win too. They want to compete at a high level and do that. So some pretty exciting things with the Vikings. And again, within 24, 48 hours, things can change again as official free agency has opened as you are listening to this program for the first time. Twins, as active as I've ever seen them when it comes to the trade market, free agency, not as much. But my first reaction when they traded Mitch Garver for the shortstop from Texas, Kiner Falefa, I think, I thought that's good. We need a shortstop. Garver, I think, has had his best days. He was a little flash in the pan, does some nice things. But I thought, well, Jeffers, he could develop as a catcher and he could do some good things. Well, then they flip that and trade the shortstop they just get from Texas to the Yankees. And it sure seems like this is mostly about getting rid of Josh Donaldson. I think it's not just the amount of money they're paying him for a guy who gets injured a lot, but I think that he rubbed people the wrong way in the Twins front office. He's pretty vocal about things, got into some online things with pitchers and how he thinks they're cheating, and now he's teammates with one of them in New York. Good luck with that. I think it's more about getting rid of Donaldson. And, you get these new guys from the Yankees, and you're saying a guy like Gary Sanchez, who was just hit against the Twins nonstop, well, will he be able to hit in target field regularly? Urshela, again, a guy who can play a lot of places. But again, by the time you hear this, things could have changed again. Trevor Story, rumored to be perhaps coming to Minnesota to play shortstop. We'll have to see. The move I'm most impressed by with the Twins is getting Sonny Gray from the Reds. You have a bona fide, very quality starter, which the Twins still need at least one more of if they think they're going to contend. But to give up your number one pick from last year got some people a little bit like, oh, wait, what are they doing? But I'll tell you what, you don't know if this Chase Petty is ever going to turn out, and knowing Minnesota luck, he probably will be a all-star Hall of Fame pitcher. But if you are going to try to tell your fan base you're going to contend, you're going to trade there. You're going to take your chances for a guy whose numbers are pretty close to Jose Barrios when you look at them and kind of dig into them a little bit. You say, well, I still would have liked to have Barrios on this team. Well, that just wasn't going to happen. The Twins burned some bridges there. And, we got Sonny Gray now. Again, can they find another quality pitcher? Otherwise, I just don't think you can contend. They still have to take care of that bullpen, which is an area of concern. But things are shaping up. It'll be really interesting a week from now to see what does that Twins lineup look like? What does the pitching staff look like? And, are we going to be contenders, or are the White Sox going to run away with this division once again? We'll just have to wait and see. But exciting times, lots of things going on, changing by the minute. And that is the state of Minnesota sports. And now it's time for This Week in Minnesota Sports History. On March 16th in 2020, Major League Baseball suspended the remainder of spring training and officially delayed the beginning of the regular season due to COVID. At that time, the CDC recommended no events with more than 50 people. And of course, that was just the beginning. As we know, eventually, most of the season was postponed into a 60-game schedule. On March 17th in 1992, the Twins traded for John Smiley and sent Denny Nagel and Midray Cummings to the Pirates. That didn't amount to a whole lot. Smiley was all right as a pitcher, but not much more. On March 18th in 1990, a 32-day lockout by Major League owners was ended, Took a little bit longer here in 2022, but that season started pretty close to on time. In 2018, Major League Baseball suspended Jorge Polanco of the Twins for 80 games for using a banned substance. Not a good situation for Polanco or the Twins. On March 19th in 1956, the biggest margin of victory at that time in the NBA was achieved by the Minneapolis Lakers, 133-75 over the St. Louis Hawks. Clearly not still the record. That's been broken numerous times, but a pretty big margin back in 1956. On March 20th, in 1989, Major League Baseball announced that Pete Rose was under investigation for gambling on games. We've spoken here before, if you go way back, our first couple of weeks to some of our guests talking about a little bit about Pete Rose, how we all believe he should be in the Hall of Fame despite his gambling. And now the NFL in the last week suspended Calvin Ridley of the Atlanta Falcons for gambling as well. March 21st in 1970, the Twins traded Charlie Walters to Washington. Walters would later return to Minnesota and become a sports reporter and sports columnist for the St. Paul Pioneer Press. In 1989, the Twins traded Steve Lombardozzi, their second baseman, to the Houston Astros. And a couple years after that, of course, Chuck Knobloch would come along and fill that position for a number of years. In 2010, the Twins learned that Joe Nathan would have season-ending Tommy John surgery, and that was not a great situation. Nathan, one of the all-time dominant relievers in Twins history. And on March 22nd, in 1989, Pete Rozelle announced he would be retiring as commissioner of the NFL after 29 years. No matter what you think of Pete Rozelle, he certainly overlooked an age where the NFL came to prominence in the eyes of the sporting public. In 2010, Joe Mauer signed his 8-year, $184 million contract with the Twins. And we could sit here and debate whether that was worth it or not. But at the time, it sure seemed like if the Twins did not re-sign Joe Mauer, the fan feedback would have been something to behold. Well, that's going to do it for another helping of waffles here at 365sportscast.com. Glad you joined us this week. Hope you'll continue to tune in every week, right here at 8 o'clock Eastern Time, 7 o'clock Central on Wednesdays. If you can't catch the original broadcast, you can also mark down. Each week's episode will replay Thursdays at 10 Eastern, Friday at 7, Saturday at 10 Eastern, Monday at 8, and Tuesday at 10 o'clock, all Eastern Standard Time. Shows also archived to YouTube. Look up whatever flips your waffle. If you've got some thoughts, if you've got some feedback, if you'd like to maybe be on the show, email me at waffleflipper22@gmail.com or message me on Twitter at Mr. D 1973. Next week, more Minnesota sports. We'll get much more into the Twins and Vikings. Will the Twins have made some more moves that solidify their roster, or will this be a rebuilding year? Will the Vikings have made all the moves they're going to make prior to the draft? How about the Timberwolves? How about the Wild? Are they going to move up in the standings, or will they stay put where they are? Come on back and find out. I'll have another special guest to delve into all that and more. Thank you again for joining me. This is Mark Domeyer signing off with Syrup.